Imagine you're living 3,000 years ago and you need money. You look around. You have grain, cattle, shells, copper, silver, and gold. All of them have value, and all of them can be traded. So why did the world eventually settle on two? That's what this episode is going to answer. Not with opinion, with the historical record of what actually happened when people across different continents and different centuries tried to use different things as money, and discovered which ones worked and which ones didn't. By the end, you'll understand why gold and silver weren't chosen arbitrarily. They earned it. This is the Honest Ledger. Before we talk about gold and silver, we need to talk about everything else, because their story is really a story of competition. Grain was money. In ancient Mesopotamia, grain paid workers, settled debts, and stored wealth. Temples acted as banks. Grain was the currency. It was plentiful, useful, and everyone needed it. Cattle were money. Across Africa, ancient Europe, and early India, livestock measured wealth. Homer's Iliad prices armor and oxen. Salt was money. Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in it. The word salary comes from the Latin for salt. And cowrie shells were money. Used across Africa, South Asia, and East Asia for thousands of years. In some regions, they were the dominant form of exchange for millennia. These weren't primitive mistakes. They were rational choices made by people trying to solve a real problem. And they worked. Until they didn't. To understand why some forms of money failed, you need to understand what money actually has to do. 5 properties, and each one matters. Durability. Money has to survive. Grain rots. It gets wet. It gets eaten by insects. If your savings are stored in grain and the warehouse floods, you've got nothing. Grain could work for short-term exchange, but as a long-term store of value, it was fragile. Next, divisibility. Money has to be breakable into smaller units. You can't cut a cow in half for a small purchase and still have 2 useful things. Cattle measured large wealth well, but for everyday commerce, they were useless. You can't buy bread off a cow. Portability. Money has to travel. Copper was used as money in many ancient societies, but to carry meaningful value in copper, you need a lot of it. For small transactions, it worked, but for serious long-distance trade, it was a burden. Scarcity. Money has to be difficult to produce in large quantities. Cowrie shells worked well where they were generally hard to find. And then European traders arrived with ships full of shells collected cheaply from the Maldives. They flooded local markets. The scarcity that gave the shells their value disappeared overnight. Communities that had stored wealth in shells watched it evaporate, not through theft, but through supply. Recognizability. Money has to be easy to verify. If people can't quickly confirm what they're receiving is genuine, every transaction becomes a potential dispute. Trust collapses. These 5 properties, durability, divisibility, portability, scarcity, and recognizability, are how money gets judged. The more of them a form of money had, the longer it survived. Gold and silver won because they scored better than the alternatives across all 5 properties at once. Not perfectly, just better. Durability? Grain rots, gold doesn't. Gold coins recovered from ancient shipwrecks after 2,000 years at the ocean floor still look like gold. Silver tarnishes, but it doesn't decay. Both metals survive time in a way that almost nothing else does. Divisibility. Cattle can't be divided, but metal can. A gold coin can be cut in half, and those halves can be weighed. Precise, repeatable, reliable. Portability. Copper gets heavy, but gold stays light. Gold has extraordinary value density. A small pouch carried across a continent could fund trade at any market along the way. Silver, slightly less dense in value, was better for smaller transactions, but still far more portable than copper, grain, or cattle. Scarcity. Shells could be imported by the shipload. Gold couldn't. Mining gold requires significant effort, equipment, and time. The supply grows slowly and predictably, constrained by geology, not by political will. Nobody could flood the world of gold the way traders flooded Africa with shells. Recognizability? Gold and silver have distinct physical properties, color, weight, density, that are hard to fake convincingly. Ancient merchants weighed them, listened to the ring they made when dropped, tested them against known samples. Verification was possible without sophisticated technology. Now put it all together. Grain fails on durability. Cattle fail on divisibility. Copper fails on portability at scale. And shells fail on scarcity. Salt fails on durability and portability in quantity. Gold and silver don't fail on any of them. They didn't win because they were perfect. They won because they were better than the alternatives. And they proved it not once in one place, but repeatedly, independently, across civilizations that had no contact with each other. China, India, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, Rome. Different cultures, different centuries, same conclusion. If gold outperformed silver on most dimensions, why did both survive as money for so long? Because they solved different problems. Gold, with its high value density and limited supply, suited large transactions and long-term wealth storage. A king paying an army, a merchant settling a major trade, a family preserving wealth across generations. Silver, more abundant and less valuable per unit, suited everyday commerce, buying bread, paying a craftsman, settling a small debt. Gold was the large bill. Silver was the change. Both were necessary. Both filled a role the other couldn't fill as efficiently. There's a common misunderstanding worth clearing up. Many people assume governments invented the monetary role of gold and silver, that kings declared these metals valuable, and everyone complied. The history doesn't support that. By the time governments began minting coins, most famously in Lydia, in what is now modern-day Turkey, around the 7th century BC, gold and silver were already being used as money by merchants across the ancient world. The metals were valued first. The coins came second. What governments did was standardize. A minted coin solved a specific problem. It removed the need to weigh and verify metal at every transaction. A coin stamped by a recognized authority carried an implicit guarantee of weight and purity. You didn't need a scale. You trusted the stamp. Markets chose the material, and states standardized it. That distinction matters. Gold and silver weren't assigned value by decree. They were selected by markets over centuries of trial and error. They earned their position. They didn't inherit it. Which brings us to what happens when states abuse that role. The Roman Empire is the clearest example. In the early empire, the silver denarius was roughly 90% pure silver. Trusted, widely accepted. It worked. But over time, as military costs rose and political pressures mounted, Roman rulers began reducing the silver content. Slowly at first, then faster. By the 3rd century AD, the denarius contained less than 5% silver. The coins still looked like coins. They still circulated, but they weren't what they claimed to be. And so, prices rose. Merchants adjusted for what they were actually receiving. Soldiers demanded payment in goods instead of coins they no longer trusted. The monetary system that had held the empire together began to fray. What Roman rulers had done was quietly destroy the properties that made silver money in the first place. The scarcity was eroded. The recognizability was fraudulent. The market eventually figured it out. It always does. You might be wondering what any of this has to do with the world today. The Roman denarius is 2,000 years old. We don't use silver coins. This feels like ancient history. But here's the question worth sitting with. The properties that made gold and silver trustworthy, durability, scarcity, resistance to debasement, those properties didn't stop mattering when we stopped using the metals. What changed is that we started using something different instead. Something that doesn't share those properties in the same way. The question of what makes money sound, what makes it a reliable store of the work you put in this week, this year, this decade, that question didn't go away. We just stopped asking it. Gold and silver became money the same way anything survives a competitive environment. They were tested against the alternatives, and they won. Not because any authority declared them valuable, not because they were rare or beautiful, but because when real people and real markets tried to preserve and transfer value across time and distance, gold and silver kept outperforming everything else. That's the honest explanation. And it leads directly to the next question. If sound money needs certain properties to protect the people who use it, what happens when those properties disappear? That's what we're going to look at next time. This is The Honest Ledger. See you next time.